Okay, so the moment of truth is then when you crop your box and then you start to piece everything together. But I'm going to go through the steps that I'm on now. So I went through the step of putting down my first square that was 1 inch by 1 inch and snapping it in place in the grid. And then I just finished step 6, which was adding all the shapes on top to create the design using only neutral colors, black, white, or gray. Then at this point, it's a good idea to save a copy, because after we get to the next steps, it's very difficult to make changes. It's like once you get to past step 7, you've reached the land of no return. When you crop your box, it's gonna turn it into like all your shapes into like tightly fit together puzzle pieces. And if you want to move an object around, it's gonna take a chunk out of the background. So it's a good idea to save a copy so that if you do want to go back to your original design and make changes, which happens when you see your patterns start to build, you might say, oh, it would be so much better if I moved this circle over there just a little bit, or I added another shape there. Then you can go back and rework your initial 1 inch by 1 inch and try something different to enhance the quality of your overall pattern. So I'm gonna just first save it as whatever the document name is that you are naming for the assignment, and then just to do a backup, do a save file, save a copy, and it's going to save everything that you've created so far and tuck it away safely so you can go back to it later if you decide you want to make changes. If the pattern isn't coming together quite right as you hoped, you can always go back and rework it in the copy. So I'm going to tuck that away, save it safely, and then now I can just keep going. And if I mess this up beyond repair, no problem. I have the copy that I can open up and rework as a backup. Okay, so then step 7 is a very important step, where you outline your strokes and you expand the appearances of your effects. So that will retain all of your strokes and your effects without any problem. Let me show you what happens if I skip step 7. So let's say I skip step 7 and I go to step 8, which is this 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All of these steps are the steps that you follow to crop your box, to crop off the edges. So let's pretend I forgot step 7 and I'm going to go to step 8, which is go back to snap to grid. So we go back to view, check snap to grid, and then step 9, make another 1 inch by 1 inch square. This is the square that I like to call the cookie cutter square. So you go find your rectangle tool, click, make it 1 inch by 1 inch, click OK. This square doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what color this square is. It's just going to be snapped to the top of everything, like the top piece of bread or like the cookie cutter. That's going to cut everything out and it's going to disappear in the end. We're going to be using Pathfinder. So I use my arrow keys to ensure that the square I call the cookie cutter square is lining up squarely against the background box along. And if you have your background box properly snapped to the grid, then you can snap the top box properly in place, lining up the edges with the background box, which is what you want. If you don't have your background box along the edges of the grid, then you'll just have to eyeball it, which you can do with smart guides, and by zooming in. Okay, then the next step, then you're going to select with your selection tool, select over the whole design. Sorry, there's a typo there, including the cookie cutter square. The cookie cutter square must be on top. And then you go to Pathfinder, go get your Pathfinder panel, go to Window, bring up Pathfinder in alphabetical order, and you crop, use the crop button. So selection tool, select everything by dragging a marquee over everything, and then find your, go to Window, bring up Pathfinder. It should be there in alphabetical order, and then find the crop button and you click crop. Ooh, but look what happened because I skipped step 7. So look what happened to my sparkles got messed up. They ended up turning back to polygons, and my flowers got crazy. And I'm missing a lot of things, right? Anything that was a stroke is missing, and other strokes are kind of... Strokes that I altered are staying, but the simple strokes like the spirals are gone, right? So strokes will get taken away. So that's why it's important to not forget step 7. So I'm going to undo that. Thank goodness for undo, Command Z. And this time I will, let me move this out of the way. This time I'm going to select everything and then go to, let me just zoom in to show you. See what disappeared? The brush strokes disappeared, the spirals disappeared. I'm gonna go ahead and go, watch this spiral here. I'm just gonna go ahead and go object, path, outline stroke. So now the spiral is no longer a stroked path, it's a filled shape, just like the brush strokes too. When I select the spiral, you'll see now it no longer has color on the stroke, it's just a fill. Same thing with brush strokes. See the spiral here, it's just a filled shape now. It's no longer a stroke. So that's what you need to do so that is retained. And also anything that has an effect needs to be expanded. So these are polygons. The flowers are polygons, the sparkles are polygons, but what needs to happen is the outline, the path itself needs to be drawn around the actual appearance of this sparkle and of the flower. So that happens when you expand the appearance of your effect. So I'm going to select all of these objects again, and I'm going to go to Object, Expand Appearance. And see now, you see what happened? And they're no longer, these shapes are no longer polygons. They're actually, the paths are actually outlining the shape of the flower, and the paths are outlining the shape of the spiral. So now I'm ready for the final step, which is to put the cookie cutter box on top, select everything, and in Pathfinder click on crop, and then it just crops off all the edges. The only issue that I have is that for whatever reason the brush strokes don't retain their transparency, because Pathfinder doesn't do that with brush strokes for some reason. So I'm going to undo that, Command Z, and show you a workaround. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remember what opacities I had. This one's 49 and this one is 84, and I'm just going to lock these brush strokes. So I'm going to go Object, Lock, Selection. And now I'm going to do my crop, which is only going to affect the objects that are not locked. So I'm going to select everything, and everything that's not locked is going to get selected. And then I'm going to crop. So now this box, everything in this box is now grouped, but the brush strokes were left behind. So I'm going to just go Object, Unlock All, and now the brush strokes are are there again, and I'm going to right click and arrange and bring the brush strokes to the front. And now what I can do is I can trim them. So like I can take my rectangle tool here and draw a rectangle along the edge of this brush stroke and select it and wait, so that's 84. So then I can trim this one. So I can select the brush stroke with this rectangle and then use Pathfinder trim and then use my direct selection tool to select just the rectangle and delete it. And then I can, and notice when I use trim, it lost its opacity also, but that's fine. I can just remember that it was, I believe, 84. And then I can take the rectangle and draw a rectangle along the edge here, but I have to make sure that it's lining up right on the edge there. And then I can select, hold down shift, select the brush stroke, and there's a little piece here that's gonna not cut off, but that's okay, I can delete it later. And then I'll just trim, and then I'll take my direct selection tool, select the rectangle, delete, and then I'll draw around that and delete that too up there. And then I can put this back to 84. So I'll just put in opacity 84, and that one's done. And then this one, I'll need to trim in a few places so I can draw over this way and this way and make these rectangles here. Actually, it'll be easier for this one if I just crop. So I'll just take my draw out 1 inch by 1 inch again, 1 inch and 1 inch, and say okay. And I'll just make it red so you can see it better. And then I'm gonna just line it up and select the, let's see if I can find the brush stroke. Is selected now. I'm gonna hold shift and click the box and use crop. And then bring this down. The opacity of this one was like, what was it, 40 something? I don't remember. 43 maybe? Okay, so now these have their different opacities, and they're not yet grouped with the rest of the box that's grouped. So I'll select everything and then group it with Command G, and now I can start putting it together. So here's the moment of truth. So to piece it together, you would select it, your selection tool, make sure that you're on snap to grid, make sure that your box is 1 inch by 1 inch before you start, otherwise you're gonna run into problems. And then hold down Option and Option drag out a duplicate, and then every time you drag out a duplicate, use your arrow keys to make sure that your box is right on the grid, because when you drag out a duplicate, for whatever reason, it allows you to move outside of the grid lines, but you want to make sure that your duplicate is snapped to the grid lines. And then you can right click and then choose transform, or hover over transform and choose reflect. Reflecting is probably the easiest way to put this together to make some new forms. And then it reflects to build. It's reflecting along the vertical right now. And I'm going to say okay, and then I'm going to zoom out. And then I'm going to select these two and Option drag out a duplicate, and use the arrow keys every time you drag a duplicate to move on and off the grid lines to make sure there are no gaps. Click outside and look at it. And you might like the way this is the seam here. You might like the way the seam comes together and work with that, or you can select the two by dragging a marquee over the two boxes, right click, transform, and reflect going the other way along. Oops, that reflect got messed up. Let me make that 90 degrees. preview, and then I want to reflect along the horizontal. That's weird. It wait, preview, there we go. So it's reflecting along the horizontal. Now it went to 0, and I'm going to say okay there. And so it starts to build these big, larger formations, and then I select the whole box there, and then you can drag out a duplicate and then just line that up with using your arrow keys. Each time you drag a duplicate, use your arrow keys to move it off and on the grid lines to make sure there are no gaps. And then, okay, that's creating these interesting diamond formations now, and then I can select this whole thing here, this whole block, and option drag out a duplicate, and you can see how rapidly it's gonna start to come together as you go through this process and build, and then you start to see the formations emerging, lots of different themes, exciting stuff happening here. Even it's always this, what I love about this assignment is no matter how many years I've done this, I always get surprised. I always see stuff that I didn't even envision yet forming before my eyes. So I'm gonna drag select over this block, and I'm gonna drag out a duplicate of this, and then do up and down, side to side with the arrow keys. It could start to slow down if you have a lot of anchor points. And then click outside. And now what we want to do is we want 7 by 9. So how many do I have across? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can select this whole block here. And actually 4, I just need 3. So I can select this block here, just the 3 rows, and duplicate those out by holding down option and dragging out a duplicate, and then using my arrow keys every time to snap on and off the grid lines, and up arrow and down arrow, and click outside and look at it, and it came together with a seam, but that could be an interesting seam that I would want to repeat, kind of like how this looks. So if you repeat the seams enough, you can make them work possibly, or not. If I don't want a seam there, I think I can select this whole set of rows and right click, transform, reflect along the, let's see, reflect along the vertical, so it goes back there and becomes seamless. So I say okay there and click outside. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, don't die, 6, 7. This is a good time to hit Command S to make sure it's going to save, because I guess there are lots of anchor points in this, so it's kind of slowing down. And then I'm just selecting the whole block and moving it, and using my arrow keys to move it up and down and side to side. And then, so I got 7 across, and I want to see how many I need going the other way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then I need 1 more row, so I'll just drag, select over the last row, and option drag down a duplicate, and use my arrow keys up and down and side to side to get the selection to line up without having gaps. And you can zoom in and look and see, and this is creating an interesting seam here. And if I like it, I mean, I could go to another row here and reflect or select just that row by dragging over just that row, and then right click, and then transform and reflect, and like have that kind of repeat, and do more of that throughout. And that could be an interesting design if I continue that way, or I could keep it all consistent the way it's been and go back and transform and reflect and say okay. And then this one I will select over this last row here by dragging a marquee over it and right click and transform and reflect so that it reflects along the horizontal like that, so that it comes together without any seam, and then it's all come together. So the final step is to center your pattern in the middle of your artboard. So you want to have all your boxes each their own group, and I would avoid, you don't want to group rows together. That just makes things more complicated. But in the very end, you want to select all of your boxes and group the whole pattern in the end, because if you just select all your boxes and then you go find your align panel in alphabetical order under window, or use your align options here, or I've got it here. You want to set your align options to align to artboard. So align to artboard, and then you can use your horizontal line center and vertical line center buttons. But if you don't have your boxes all grouped together in the end as one big group, then this is what happens. So you choose horizontal line center, and they all jump on top of each other in one column down the middle. And then you do vertical line center, and it looks like it's down to going to one box, but it's just really 7 times 9 boxes. It's like 63 boxes right on top of each other. So we don't want that. I'm going to undo that. Command Z again. And then make sure you group. Command G, object, group, or Control G on Windows. Easy to remember keyboard shortcut. And then you use your horizontal line center and your vertical line center, and then you'll have your pattern nicely centered, and you'll be all set for next week when we do the color version. Okay, any questions about that? So just save that, and you don't have to turn it in for 2 weeks. So this week just focus on building the black and white version, and next week we'll talk about color.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great night. Thanks everyone for hanging in there.